Well, I'm an animator based in Natimuk, and I've been making films now for what seems like a very long time, 10 years. Working with computers has meant that I can leave big studios and just be anywhere I like. A couple of years ago I did a residency at the Natimuk Primary School. Brendan Bush, who was the principal at the time, organised me to come along.
I wanted kids to become more confident in using computer technology, even the younger ones, to actually have some understanding of animation. And really we achieved that. I mean, all of the students created an animation. Our grade 6 students really got a good connection with the community, and that the artists within it had a real role to play in the community as well.
We interviewed a handful of people who'd been to the school some 70 years prior.
That was basically designed to get some of our students who are really capable grade 6 students to actually be extended and start thinking a bit laterally about some of the tasks and some of the environment they are in.
What year did you come to Natimuk?
What year did I come to Natimuk? Well, I've lived here all my life, apart from war service years. So that's quite a while. I can talk about the last 70 odd years.
We had some coffee and cakes and then talked about what it was like at school in the 1930s. And it was great to do it in the actual schoolroom where they'd been at school, because they could look up and point at the blackboard and say, you know, that's the blackboard where I had to go and do the sums, or that's the window I jumped out of, or that's the corner where the old kerosene heater were.
The Year 6 students had wondered why this old building was placed there, and by talking to, say, Roy and Tim, and that, they'd suddenly appreciated that this was their history, that they'd actually had their classes in this old classroom, and that they had strong attachments to it. So all of a sudden this old dilapidated building all of a sudden became part of the Natimuk history, and so they started to appreciate it, which was good.
Thelma will probably recall the time when she was standing at the front of the blackboard here. You remember that?
Well, do I ever? I had to do a sum.
And she made a mistake. Bang, bang.
You're still worried about it.
That's right, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think they enjoyed telling the stories. I think they enjoyed having the audience of the kids, some new ears to listen to the stories.
I had trouble with a teacher there, or she had trouble with me. It was the one that Edgar was singing the praises about, but I never ever got on with her. She took to me this one Friday, and I thought she's not going to catch me. I just turned around, vaulted out the window and went home.
He just nicked off. Oh gosh, we thought he's going to be in trouble. But Monday morning came, we were waiting for the excitement, and never another word said.
I think they liked the fact that it had taken their stories and the students had basically put together a really good animations on it, that they'd actually had their stories sort of brought to life, and that was the impression that they really appreciated, and the fact that there was that connection between these young students and themselves.
While we were making the films, they'd go out for break at lunchtime. I remember looking out through the window at the staff room and seeing them playing in the yard, and they were playing in my day, you know, I'm going to be Roy Ubergang and I'm going to be Thelma, and you know, I'll be Tim Beam. And it probably would have been very hard to get them to sit down for a long time, for an hour or so, and listen to all those stories directly. But it was a format that they were really receptive to, and they'd sort of taken on the stories sort of in that way and got excited about them. To make the film, there were a number of things that we needed to do. There were characters walking. A lot of it was tales of going to school and coming home, and they rode horses and they rode bikes, and some of them walked. And so we split up with the various kids, who wants to do this and who wants to do that, and all the girls wanted to do riding horses and the boys were all happy to do bikes. So everybody was doing their own character, and then work with them to do the various positions. With a person walking along, for example, there's perhaps 5 drawings. There's sort of the legs wide apart and then the legs crossed over in the middle. Those are the 2 most important. If they just get them you know, that would do at a pinch. This one guy did this great little bird walking along, and he just had the two drawings, the legs apart and the legs crossed, and you could just use the two pictures and it worked beautifully. The rest of the drawings are just in-betweens, I guess, and smoothing that out, so sort of front foot up in the air and back foot up in the air. They would often trace the upper body and then just draw the legs in different positions. Some of them would work with the arms as well, so your arms sort of move in the opposite directions to your legs. Some of them did that, some of them didn't. Like you kind of talk about these things and then they interpret them, you know, in their own way, which is great, because I'm not really interested in just kind of a bunch of pictures that looked like I did them, and they certainly didn't look like something I'd done. They were just these amazing kind of free drawings. The other thing that was a very big part of the films was the talking, the telling of the stories, and so we did a lot of lip syncing. Each of the kids would draw a character with a face but no mouth, and then we talked about all the different shapes that your mouth makes when you're talking, and there's 8 or so different mouths you can get away with using. There's sort of an E and a O and a oo and an ah, and then a or a b. They're the same sort of thing. There's a few trickier ones, where you bite your bottom lip. And so we had a day with all the kids where we were just talking about and looking at each other's faces while we were making all the sounds. And then they would draw their interpretation of that, I guess, their set of 8 or so mouths. And some of them were great. We're just thinking sort of an O mouth with this big row of teeth just all around the inside of their mouth. On one layer you have your character, and then you put the mouths on another layer in front of that, and you have a soundtrack, and you can, over time, you can swap the mouths around, so when you hear you can listen to the sound of the soundtrack, and then when there's an O sound, you put the O mouth in, and ooh, and it's a bit of a painstaking process, but it's not too bad. We've got the kids to trace their characters a few times. Because it's not a perfect tracing, you just get a bit of wiggle in the line. Some you get more wiggle than others. Gives it a bit of a life, and it doesn't stand out so much when you then put the mouths moving over the top of it, because the whole thing's moving. Sometimes we got those same characters and then did the walk cycles with them, and so you'd have them talking and walking along. You have a loop that you've made of the walking legs, and it will just sort of walk on the spot, and then you animate that walking loop so that it moves from left to right or right to left or whatever the story calls for. And so you build the picture up to the soundtrack. You just build it up out of all of the elements that the kids have drawn with a program called Flash.
We really want to be able to provide students with opportunities both in the area of technology and being able to use that technology to communicate. Now, sometimes at times where, as teachers being older, we're probably not as technologically capable as the students, or able to pick it up as quickly. And through this project we were able to build on the skills of the teachers as well as develop the skills of the students. So I think that the teachers really saw basically the students engaged and really happy to be involved in the project.
I'd end up with a huge pile of stuff to be scanned in. The drawings that you've scanned in, you cut the background off. If it's a character, for instance, you cut the white sort of background off from behind it, and you do that with all the pictures, and then you build it up in layers. So you have the background, the houses and trees and all of that sort of thing on one layer, and then you put the characters on the next layer, and if there's 3 or 4 characters, you have 3 or 4 layers with one character on each. And then if they were talking or something like that, then you put the mouths on a layer on top of that. Frame by frame you move them along or swap them over if in the case of the mouths. And then we'd get to a spot where we'd sort of used all the pictures and there were still holes in the story, and we'd play it back to them. Okay, well, you know, this girl needs to be writing on the blackboard, so we need an arm that's writing on the blackboard with a bit of chalk, or the teacher's angry and she's running towards them, so we're going to need to do the teacher, and then they'd all kind of go back to their desks and work away on their characters some more, and then you get more scanning. And so it was good to just sort of keep going backwards and forwards. It was probably close to 2 months of solid work, but spread over 2 years. And it's actually quite quick. It would be a really frantic couple of hours. You'd go in there and you'd just have this swarm of kids super keen, all rushing up to me wanting to know what to do next. They're just amazingly confident and amazingly quick at drawing any picture. So we need a house, no problem, and they're back in a minute with this great drawing of a house. You know, well, that's good. Actually, we need now a whole street of houses, and no problem, and they're back in another minute with a whole street scene. And there's nothing they can't draw. So as they get a bit older, they sort of tend to get a bit more self-conscious, and even though they get probably better at wrangling a pencil, they get less and less confident for some reason.
I'm really proud of what the kids have achieved, because all of them achieved something, because not all of them found it easy at times to draw pictures to tell their stories. We talk about some students who really felt a sense of achievement, who otherwise would not have achieved so highly at school because they had poor literacy skills or a whole range of things. But there are other students who did find it challenging to draw pictures to tell a story, and they all did it, and then they all were really happy with what they've achieved as well.
One of the things I liked about the project, it gives kids the idea that media is something you can create. It's not just something you consume and you watch on telly, but you actually, all those things have been made, and that you can make films. They're a thing you can make as well as consume. We finished up just in time to screen on the silos as part of the Natimuk Fringe Festival. That was its premiere screening, and they projected the film amongst other things with all the aerial performance and choir and various bits like that. And it was great to see the kids sort of watching their drawings up in front of thousands of people, and the sort of the response and the applause that was getting. I can still remember Kane Surratt standing up and just beaming when everyone was laughing at his drawing of Roy. He was just so proud. He was sort of, that's my drawing, and all these people are clapping and cheering at it.
I reckon it was great. You see, being of an older generation and being here all my life and not getting round as much as I used to, you miss out on meeting all these folk. There was quite a lot of pleasure out of being there.
I think it really assisted in making connections between the whole range of diverse groups within our community. I mean, the Natimuk community is a diverse community. It's probably has a range of people from an artistic background, from the rock climbing background, and also the farming community that have probably been established here for hundreds of years. So, I mean, I think that, and those diverse groups probably are represented at the school, and the animation project was a really good link between both the artistic groups within the community and the students, and therefore their parents. And I think it's amazing to see when we had the Natimuk Fringe Festival and the Silo event. It was great to see there was a real sense of celebration amongst all the local community, and we were celebrating all the students, all the kids involved in that artistic project, and I think that was really bringing together the community too, which is good.
I came in contact with this film in my role as the artistic director for The Village, which is a festival that celebrates all manner of short artwork. The Village has been in Horsham and in Melbourne, in Footscray, and also down at a big rock festival, the Falls Festival, 14,000 mainly younger folk watching a whole lot of international rock and roll. And in every single place, people will, and you know, at 3 o'clock in the morning at the Falls, people will sit down and watch In My Day and be utterly and completely transported to a little country town in the Wimmera. It's an absolute, just super favourite for people to go and sit in this little room and watch this fantastic animation, and then they come racing out, and you see them come racing out and saying, I've just seen this, you got to go, and they're going to do it again in 10 minutes, you got to go back in and see it. In My Day is another project where we see a whole lot of non-professional artists, in fact people who wouldn't even consider themselves to be artists, making a piece of work which is absolutely second to none in terms of its quality.
It actually went off to the Melbourne Film Festival, where it won the Best Animation in 2005. Screened in Prague, the Melbourne Animation Festival, the Sydney Film Festival, the St Kilda Film Festival. The tales of the Uber gangs going to school is spreading.
Oh, it's nice to think that people enjoyed it. You enjoyed it, didn't you, Kate?
Yeah, pretty funny anyway.
People are interested in their stories, and to see people kind of enjoying their stories in a different environment, not just them sort of telling it around the table at, you know, Sunday lunch, but in a cinema with, you know, audience, hundreds of people watching it.
The really powerful thing about this is the fact that students who live in a small country town and go to a small rural primary school of only 60 students can then create artwork that people all over the world get to see.